If you see it, you correct it. You don't let them get away with it, and you don't excuse it in your own mind or for them. Welcome back to the Maven Parent Podcast. Today we are doing part 2 of the topic of manners and should we make our kids have good manners. And so the first episode we talked about basically the Christian view, how we should think about it. How does God think about how we treat other people, how we train our children in this? Yeah,
and if you haven't listened to that one, you got to listen to that one, because that is the that will motivate this one. Mm-hmm. Because this episode, we really want to get into the practical stuff. Yeah. But this is where it's so important for us to understand how our ideas, our worldview, our beliefs motivate action.
Yeah.
In fact, we've talked about this even with our own kids. I think in when we did a couple episodes on the existence of God and the idea of belief formation, mm-hmm. and how beliefs, it's not, we don't want to just think about, well, do we believe this or don't we believe this? But we also want to think about the strength of the belief, the centrality of a belief, if it's central or if it's on the periphery, how confident we are in that belief, and as well as the content of the belief. Mm-hmm. And so that's why what we did in the last episode is so important, because we want parents to realize that manners are more than just personal preferences or just, what's kind of socially acceptable.
Just what they do in the South.
Yeah, right. No, these go deeper, mm-hmm. and there's significance here, and they really go back to the love and the respect that we are able to show for other human beings made in God's image. Okay. So, and what we love to do too then is not just stay in the realm of ideas, not just think well about this stuff, but we also want to live well.
Yeah.
In fact, hey, that's a great slogan. Think well, live well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm sure
nobody out there who heard this.
Slogan.
Think well, live well.
Yeah.
Really?
I bet you if we Googled it.
Oh, okay. All right, we're going to Google that, and then we're going to see if we can trademark it.
But oh my gosh. But
so nobody can steal it out there.
That really has been, if you've listened to more than a couple of our podcasts, hopefully you've gotten that vibe from us, that this is kind of our goal, is to help you think more deeply about these things and then give the practical outworkings of those. Yeah. Because we want, when our kids are throwing tantrums or we're dealing with an issue, we want the quick fix. We want okay, will someone just tell me what to do?
Yeah, you definitely want the quick fix.
You can find people who will give you okay, yeah, do this, this, and this. But if they tell you to do that and it's not actually grounded in a deeper understanding of why you would do that.
It's not grounded in the Christian worldview.
In reality, then it's not going to stick. It's not going to be something that you're going to say, you know what, it didn't work today, but I'm going to try it again tomorrow because I know why I'm doing this. And so that's why in the podcast, all the issues we look at, we try to give that foundation for it. And then, okay, what's the outworkings of this? Mm-hmm. And that's what this podcast is about today. So these are examples of good manners that we think if you are, living in 21st century America, and so, because there is cultural context to things, but in our culture, what's looked at as polite and well-behaved kind of things, how you would treat other people. And some of these we just think are kind of non-negotiables. These are things you should be teaching your children to do, even when it's hard, even when they don't want to, because you realize all that we talked about in the first episode is that it brings about good.
Yeah, there's some long-term fruit that will be produced, even if you're not seeing it right now, right? That's a lot of parenting, a lot of sowing, years and years of sowing, not reaping anything. And then, sorry, did I start?
You just went off in a little.
Yeah, no, but a lot of sowing, and sometimes you don't reap that stuff till years and years later. Yeah. Okay, so that's why if you've got the biblical worldview, the Christian worldview, the scriptures picture of reality, they're motivating you. You'll stay in it. You'll realize why this is important and why we need to stick to it. But really, there are kind of three manners that we would say are, or three kind of issues that have been pretty central for us and what we've tried to teach our own kids. And there could be a lot more, and we're not going to be able to discuss everything. But these three cover a lot of ground.
Yeah. So the first one is appropriate place to start because it's how you train your kids to greet other people. So now it's the first kind of interaction, greeting people. How do we, train our kids to greet people? So I think, again, that we're training them to look at others as important. We're training them to not just think about themselves, but to think about other people.
Yeah.
So just the act of greeting people is something I think in the culture, like we were talking about in the first podcast, there's just not a lot of young students or young kids that we just interact with in community and wherever that even greet us when they see us.
Yeah.
Or our kids, or, we see them interacting with other people, and we'll see that they don't, when they come into the house or when you meet somewhere, say you're meeting friends for dinner or you're meeting grandma and grandpa. And so even just when you get together, they don't immediately go and greet the people that you're now going to be hanging out with.
Yeah. Now, and this is where we want to constantly push us to think underneath. Well, okay, what's deeper here? Think about what greeting does. When you greet somebody, that means it symbolizes, it shows, it reveals that you're recognizing that person. You're noticing that person, right? And when you are more outward looking, you notice other people. When all you are is
self-focused.
You only consider your own interests, you're self-focused, you're selfish, you only notice yourself. And so this is why training our kids to greet people can be so important.
Yeah.
Get you to look out from yourself, notice other people, recognize that they're there, that they're present. And it also is a big sign, I think, of respect and them respecting them. And so someone comes over to the house, whether they just drop by or whether it's an arranged dinner or something like that, when people come over who don't live at the home and they walk in the door, the appropriate action when they first walk in the door is to greet them. That is polite, right? That's good manners. Why? Because it recognizes, okay, now we have some guests, and we want to treat them with respect and courtesy, and we want to recognize them. And, and of course, it reminds me of the kind of the cliche that we use all the time now, like, I see you. I hate that. But I get what it's getting at, right? And that's kind of the idea. Like, you're communicating, this person is seen.
Yeah.
And when you don't recognize them, it communicates, I don't see you. I don't notice you.
Yeah.
You're not important enough to be noticed.
Yeah.
Right? You're not important enough to be addressed.
Yeah. Because we've all had that experience where we're not greeted and you're just like, do you not want me here?
Yeah.
Do you not see me or whatever? I'm thinking too about like at church, and training our kids to greet people at church. Now we have shy kids and we have not shy children in our home. And so, of course, this is much easier for the extroverted children. It's more natural. But even our shy kids, we train in looking adults in the eye, especially someone who says, "Oh, hi, so-and-so," that you respond, even if it's scary or whatever, but it's a respectful thing to do. And I think about I've taught Sunday school for years and years, and it is few and far between that I have kids that come into the class and say, "Hi, Mrs. Kunkel." They just walk right in.
Yeah.
And so even training our children to greet their Sunday school teacher, and then we're going to talk about later saying thank you, but just greeting people, their teacher at school every day.
Okay, so that's really practical. Maybe teaching your kid, starting in preschool or kindergarten, the first thing you do when you walk into that classroom, before you hang up your backpack or before you play with your friend, you go find your teacher
and you say good morning, or
good morning, Mr. or Mrs. Smith.
Yeah.
And so that's talk about practical. That's very practical. Or when anyone comes into our home, you get up from what you're doing and you go over and you say hello, you shake their hand, or you give them a hug and you say hi, and you recognize them. And of course, at younger ages, you don't necessarily have to get into the why yet. You want to just get them habituated to this, that this is normal. This is the normal thing that we do, right? And just think about think about the verses that we read last episode. This edifies. This gives grace. This it's encouraging to an adult when a kid comes and says hello.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about sports too. Like when they get to the soccer field or the baseball field, that the one of the first things they would do would be to go say, "Hi, coach." Because I have been on sports fields with our kids, and I have seen coaches recognize kids as they're coming in. Oh, hey, so-and-so, hey, so-and-so. And the kids don't even respond back, let alone go out of their way to go say hi to coach.
Yeah.
So just a greeting of like, hey, there's a human being. Let's recognize that we see them.
Yeah. And if you don't, that's rude. Right. And scripture has things to say about rude behavior. And it sometimes does boggle my mind that we as believers will just let our kids get away with rude behavior, or we don't address it. And that's something to think about, I think, for parents. Why do you allow your kids to get away with that kind of rude behavior? Now, maybe it's just you haven't seen it as rude behavior before, but I would say think more deeply about this. What would you call it when a coach or a teacher or a parent or a friend or whoever, a grandparent, addresses your kid, says something, and your kid doesn't respond? Right? Now, again, there's some shyness there, but even our shy kids, we would not let that be an excuse for them to then communicate something that's rude, communicate a message that's rude. And so that actually shouldn't be tolerated. That was something we need to address with our kids.
Yeah, if you see it, you correct it. You don't let them get away with it, and you don't excuse it in your own mind or for them. Don't excuse it with them. Oh, yeah, I know you were tired. It's okay that you didn't say hi to grandma.
Yeah.
Don't give them a way out of, or an excuse for being rude.
And it doesn't matter what age they're at. And then as they get older, so they're in middle school and high school, you're still working with them. But this is where you can then give the why. Hey, when you go in to grandma's house and the first thing you do, you go give grandma a big hug and you give her a kiss and you say, "Hi, grandma." You know how that makes grandma feel? I mean, just makes her feel loved. Makes her feel respected, makes her feel like a valuable person, and so that's why we do this. And you give them that, the reasoning as they get older.
Yeah.
And we're continuing to remind our kids. I mean, my parents came over about a week ago, and Jonah was with his buddy on the couch right behind us, and they were playing a video game. And it wasn't intentional. I mean, it wasn't out of, some kind of disrespect, but he was just so wrapped up in the video game, like a little 11-year-old boy can be, that he didn't greet grandma when she came in. And so I just, knowing that situation, it wasn't intentional. I just said, "Hey, Jonah, grandma's here. Did you greet grandma?" And then he got, and he jumped up and he ran over and gave grandma a hug. But it's not letting those things go, because they're not just little things. I want to help habituate their heart toward looking at others and noticing others. And that's what greeting people does. And so there's just all of these different arenas where we can do that. I mean, whether it's just going to the grocery store and when you walk up to a clerk and saying, hey, good afternoon. I mean, and that's something, gosh, we could work on as adults, right? Or, yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of times I do notice, because it's common to just be like, oh, hey, how are you? And a store clerk will greet you that way or whatever. But I try to make it a habit to say, I'm doing good. How are you today? How has work been today? Or I'll try to ask a question back to them. And that's just, a way to greet them that isn't just like, oh, hey, kind of thing, but that you're actually greeting them with a greeting, not just like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, no.
Did you want to say something?
Ready to transition to the second
so
example of a good manner.
The second one that we think, besides teaching your kids to greet people, is to force your kids to thank people, to say thank you.
Because the authentic self is often selfish and ungrateful. So we have to force ourselves to act in thankful ways that will help us then become more thankful people.
Yeah. And I think this starts actually in their relationship with us. So teaching them to say thank you to us. Yeah. So, you do this a lot with the kids. At dinner time, when we sit down to eat dinner, you'll say, thanks, Mom, for dinner, and you'll kind of model for them. Or you'll, when they're little, you'll say thanks to Mom. Look at all that she made us, tonight. And so even in little ways of teaching them to say thank you when we do things for them. And again, because I think that gets their attention, that they don't just deserve all this stuff.
Yeah.
They're not like a prince or a princess and we're their servants. We're their parents and we're doing things for them all the time, but they can express thankfulness, especially when it's really appropriate for them to do that. If you take them to get a new pair of shoes or a new pair of baseball cleats our son needed, recently, and you just teach them, even if he forgets to say it, I'll say, I didn't hear you say thanks for the cleats that we just bought. Oh, sorry, Mom. Thanks for that. So even you're teaching them. It's not like you expect that they're always going to remember, but you remind them. And I think the first relationship to remind them and teach them in it is our relationship with them.
Yeah, and the appropriate response when someone does something for you or gives you something is to say thank you. And what that does is it develops the kind of the gratitude in the heart. It helps our kids to become appreciative. It mitigates against this kind of sense of, just a spoiled culture, a culture that has so much.
Entitled.
Entitled. It fights against those things. And it's appropriate to the action. And so we actually do this for things that are big and small. So it could be sitting at the dinner table and you say, hey, could you please hand me a napkin? And the napkin's handed, the response is thank you, or it's walking out of the store and, Jonah forgets to say thank you, and so I just put my arm around him and I'll go, hey, what do you need to say, bud? And now, of course, as a parent, I would love at that point that it would just come naturally. And what I've seen over time is it does become more natural. So more often than not, the 11-year-old will say thank you, but he still needs those reminders, right? Because we're still trying to cultivate that. Yeah. I need those reminders as an adult. And so we're developing a culture within our family. And the great thing is that the more you do this, with all of your kids, with the adults, the parents, it becomes more of a culture. Yeah. And then there's momentum. And so I feel like it's been easier for us with the younger kids Because now
yeah.
the older kids, we've done some of the hard work with the older kids, and they are polite and they do
model
these
it
things.
for the younger kids.
Yeah, and it creates a culture that just helps reinforce that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having the expectation that you're going to have to, this is just going to be something you're going to have to keep training them in, especially as they get older and they're in new situations. You know, like I'm thinking about how I've had to send our kids back outside, you know, someone else's mom or dad gives them a ride home. They walk in. I say, "Oh, did you thank so-and-so for the ride?" "Oh, no." And I'll say, "Run back out and go say thank you."
Yep.
You know, like, because they're going to forget or they're going to be in new situations. And so you're just teaching them to be aware of when people are doing things for them or giving them things or whatever. And speaking of giving them things, you know, anytime they're given a present, a birthday present or Christmas present or whatever, we expect our children to say thank you to the people. And especially if it is a family member, someone they trust and love, that they would even go give them a hug and show, you know, that they appreciate it.
Yeah. I think we've been pretty intentional about that, is like at Christmas. And so, you know, the holidays are coming up here. At Christmas, anytime you open a gift from somebody, one of the relatives, as soon as you open that gift, you pause, you get up, you go say thank you and give a hug. And that's the appropriate gesture. So that's another real practical way. I think one thing that you've done this has been an emphasis that you have brought to our family is after practice, that our kids go and say thank you to the coach after practice, which that wasn't really on my radar, but until you had the kids start doing that. And I thought, wow, that's really appropriate, because here the coach is, and I've coached a lot of our kids' sports. You're volunteering your time, you're putting effort into this. And wow, for a kid to come and just after a practice, which isn't as significant, maybe of an event, but to say thank you really communicates something to the coach. And that's, I know with Jonah playing football last season, that really meant a lot and communicated a lot to his coach.
Yeah. Yeah. He's in baseball right now, and I don't see, when I come to pick him up, I don't see any of the other kids thank the coach at the end, but he's thankfully in that habit. But I do think it must make the coach feel good of at least somebody's thankful. I mean, everybody, you just run off the field and go home. And as you say, the majority of coaches for kids are all volunteers. They're just giving their time. So reminding your kids of that, saying, did you know coach he's not paid to be here. He's just doing this, or she's just doing this because she loves this sport and wants to teach it to you guys, or whatever. So
and thankfulness helps battle that entitlement mentality. And so does the third example that we want to bring up. And that's the issue of saying please, right? When you say please, the posture of that and what's being communicated is, I don't deserve this. I'm asking for it. I'm not entitled to this. And so it helps to fight that entitlement mentality. And it just goes hand in hand with thankfulness. You and I, and we want our kids to understand this as well, but you and I we're not owed things by other people all the time. We're not owed all of the kind things that someone does for us. And so this is please accompanying a request is appropriate when that person doesn't have to give that to me, and we're using please and then thank you. And those are appropriate to battle, the mentality. So we've tried to teach our kids, anytime you ask for something, whether it's, the napkin at the dinner table, or you want that toy at the store, or whatever, whatever it might be, is that it's appropriate to say please. Because you don't necessarily deserve that. You're not entitled to it. We don't owe it to you.
Yeah, actually and this is another one where just have the expectation you're going to have to remind your kids to do it over and over again. And recently, our youngest, we keep giving examples of him, but anyway, he was sick, and so I was going to run a bath for him. And I have those lavender bath salts, and when he's sick, he like loves those.
Are you sure you should be
Okay,
sharing
don't
this
tell him I'm
information?
telling. It's just between us. So anyway, I said, okay, I'll run your bath and then you can get in. And he just said, oh, put the bath salts in, Mom. And then he didn't say it, rude or anything, but it was just like, just do this, Mom, would you? Kind of thing. And I said, oh, I didn't realize you had become a prince all of a sudden and can just make commands. And then you're laughing. Actually, he started cracking up when I said that. And then he's like, oh, Mom. And he was laughing. And then I said, how do you ask me to put? And then he says, oh, Mom, could you please? Da, 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 da. So, that's the kind, we just expect that you're going to have to remind them. And that's okay. It's just, it's this habit. It's this habit.
That gets into these practical tips.
Okay.
Right. And one of the practical tips is develop a healthy expectation that you're going to have to remind them again and again and again. Because I remember early on, I would get too easily frustrated. Like, I've told you, to say please and thank you. And,
so just do it.
Here I am reminding you again. And I think after our kids getting older, realizing, gosh, sometimes I have to remind the 21-year-old, or the 19-year-old. And now not as often as the 11-year-old, but they're still having to remind them. And you know what? When I think about it, I have to be reminded about that too.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I was actually going to add that.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure you were. That's why I was preemptively cutting that off. No, but we do. And that's where it's great because sometimes, and this is where we need humility, the kids will say, Dad, you didn't say please. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I got to live this out too. But there's a healthy expectation that you'll keep you need to keep reminding them.
Yeah,
and that's okay. That's just, we all need those reminders. But, and I think this tip goes with it. Well, I was going to make this the last tip.
Yeah, make it the last tip because I was going to go to this one. Because I think actually having the expectation that they're going to need our reminders can lead to our next tip, which is to prep when we can, to prep them ahead of time and remind them ahead of time. So then it's not like at the end saying, did you do it? But saying, so when you are about to see people, remind them, hey, you guys, when we get there, make sure you greet everybody.
Yeah, we've done that on the drive over to someone's house.
Yeah, for sure. Or when people are coming over here, hey guys, make sure when they do get here, come out of your rooms, say hi, whatever. And so prepping them for the situations and what's going on, and this was especially helpful thinking of our more shy kids. It was really helpful when they knew ahead of time, so-and-so's coming over, or we're going somewhere, we're going to the zoo, we're going to see these families. So make sure when we first get there that you go around and say hi to everyone. And, Mommy wants you, look them in the eye, say hi, and at least do that. And so preparing them for situations prepares them to be successful in those. And so then it's not just that we're always going, you didn't say it, or in front of people, we're always going, did you say thank you? Like if you can whisper to them, you're out with grandma and grandpa or auntie or whatever, and the auntie says, oh, I'll go grab an ice cream. And then you can say, okay, when she brings it back, make sure you say thank you. So these sorts of things where you're helping to remind them even of situations that they're going to be in.
Yeah. So prep kids beforehand is a good practical tip. And start at really young ages. I mean, do you think is 1-year-old, is that too young to start teaching manners?
No, depending on the one. I mean, a lot of 1-year-olds can talk, and even if they can't, they're like trying to. So I know with our kids, even when they couldn't talk, it was so cute. But it's like thank you, and they're not really saying the words perfectly, but you're teaching them this habit of saying please. And I know people who have taught their kids, sign language before they can talk. And so they teach them how to sign thank you and how to sign please. So I think this can start really young.
Yeah.
And should start really young, because when they're young, people are doing a lot of stuff for them. So you can say, thank your sister for going to get your book. That was so nice. And, these sorts of things. So you can start it really young and should.
Yeah. And the younger you start, the I guess the more advanced or the more developed these kind of habits become in your kids earlier on.
Yeah.
So it's kind of raising the bar.
Yeah.
And of course, it's the way you do it with a 1 or 2 year old is going to be different than with the older kids.
Yeah.
But start young is the
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
Is don't think that you have to wait till they're 6 or 7 or to where they fully understand these concepts. No,
Yeah.
you can be habituating character. You can be habituating behaviors and actions early on.
You think about little ones and how you can teach them to say hi, and then you can teach them say bye, and then give Uncle Brett a kiss. Like these sorts of things. We can do that so young, and so that's good. The second to last one, I know you want the last one to be, but the second to last is just that we model the behavior that we are hoping for them. And so this can be hard. And like you said, I think it is good to be humble and to realize if we start training our kids in using manners, then when we don't, they're going to go,
right.
Mom, that was so rude. Or they're going to be like, Mom, you didn't say, or like one of our kids likes to say, how do you ask? And so, just they're going to call you out on it. So, and that's good. Actually, that's good, especially if you have some bad habits of being polite or kind to people.
But we set the tone. We create the culture.
Yeah.
We're a big part of creating the culture in our family. And so let me model for you what this looks like right now, Erin. Erin, would you please model for our kids more manners?
Oh my gosh.
Thank you. There you go.
Do you want to take a poll with our 5 children on who uses manners better? Because I guarantee I'll win. I'll bet you a Starbucks.
I'll have to pray about that. I'll pray about that. So moving on to our final tip, be encouraged by the feedback you get from other people.
What if it's not good feedback?
Okay, sorry.
Your kid was super rude.
Yeah, don't be encouraged by that one. Be encouraged by the positive feedback you get from others.
Positive. Okay.
And here's the idea behind this is that sometimes, you're just when you're at home and you're around your family and you feel safe, you let your guard down, right? And so you're not as polite at home. And don't smirk at me like that. That's wow.
I didn't know that smirk.
Well, just so you know, that act was rude right now. So you just put on this. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
Yes, obviously at home. So
we all do that.
yes.
We all do that. But you let your hair down.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we can be less grateful, less appreciative of those in our own family.
Yeah.
And so, but sometimes then you get that outside look.
Yeah, like a teacher will say about, one of our kids, like, oh, they're just so sweet. They're always so polite and say thank you. And you're thinking,
who?
What? I
What
have
kid?
to tell him to say thank you all. So yes. Or the coach will be like, wow, your kid is so great. They always help clean up, So yes, when you get those things, be encouraged by it, because it means even if it's not all the time, which who's good all the time?
Definitely not you, honey.
But that you're teaching, your work is having fruit.
Yes.
There's fruit to it, that your kids are starting to treat other people like they matter.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yep. And you should be encouraged, because what that symbolizes is, again, something deeper. Deeper. It means that your kids are learning how to treat fellow image bearers with love and respect that is worthy of that individual, or due that individual And so manners are important. And so we need to think carefully about them. We've laid out a lot of practical things that we can do. And maybe you just say, hey, let's just take one of those issues, thankfulness or greeting people.
Yeah.
And we're just going to start working on that right now. As a
Actually,
family.
I'm glad you said that, because sometimes you can hear stuff like this and you think, oh my word, my kid doesn't do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So just pick one. Just maybe start with the greetings, or maybe start with the thank you or whatever, but pick one and just really, for the next few weeks, it's your thing. It's your thing that you're talking about. You're reminding them and tell, if they're old enough, you can say, hey, I realize that we haven't gotten into a good habit of thanking others. So as a family, we're working on it from now on.
Yeah. And it's okay if it doesn't come natural. Some of us maybe grew up in homes where it wasn't taught well, or maybe we have parents that were rude and did not practice good manners, and in so doing weren't respectful of others. Well, that we can break that with our families, and that'll be our natural inclination if that was kind of in our family system. But we can break that. We can bring new habits into our home, but it does take effort, and it is worth the effort because of what this really means and signifies. And it helps us to recognize that there are wonderful people out there who are made in God's image, and they're valuable and they're worthy of dignity and respect. Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.